Hello, I'm Rebecca of Eclectic Endeavors. Thank you for joining me today. I'm going to be teaching you how to make this beautiful ruffled daffodil flower. It's basically made from cardstock and it's quite simple. You do need a few things to start. I'm going to be listing a supply list at the end of the video, both for your basic supplies and tools. So I hope you'll take a look at that. But for now, let's get started. I'm going to start with the center of the flower. As you can see, there are some little stamens there in the middle. Now you can use a die for that if you have one, and I'll be listing a die that's you can use as an option at the end of the video. But since I don't have one, I actually went with my own way to make stamens. I use a piece of cardstock that I cut into this shape and roll it, sort of like quilling. So I'm going to show you how I do that. You're going to take a scrap of paper. I'm just using white as an example. I don't have very much of this color cardstock, so I didn't want to waste any in the example. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a piece. Now I'm not going to give you exact measurements for this. I'm going to give you approximates, and then you're going to measure it as you go along and trim as needed, because every weight of cardstock is different and will therefore roll up differently. So I started with a piece that is about 3 inches long and 1/2 inch wide. You definitely want the 1/2 inch wide, but the length is going to vary. Then I measured in about 5/8 of an inch in, and I made a little mark. Then what you want to do is you want to trim about 1/8 of an inch wide up to that mark, and then trim off this excess, and then discard that piece. And then you want to make some little snips. Now, I would normally tell you that they're approximately 1 millimeter, but I know not everyone knows what 1 millimeter is. So it's a little bit smaller than 1/16 of an inch. So if you look on a ruler and you find the 1/16 of an inch, go a little bit smaller than that. And you're going to make some snips. It doesn't have to be exact, but you just want to make some little skinny pieces of cardstock. They're going to stick up and be your stamen. So you want to snip, and you want to end up with 12 snips, and what we're going to do is we're going to remove every other piece and just leave 6 pieces of cardstock sticking up to make our stamens. You want to clip down to approximately the 1/8 of an inch, but again, it doesn't have to be that exact. And if you use white cardstock, you can tint it if you like, or again, you can use any color of cardstock that you like, depending on what color you want your stamens to be, depending on what color of flower you're working on. Now, a lot of these ruffly daffodils are actually something other than yellow in the middle. Pink and peach are very popular. Let's see how many have I got now that I'm talking. I'm not counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Oh, good thing I stopped myself. Okay, so you're going to snip away every other piece. Sorry, I hope the camera can see all this I'm doing here. So I should be left with 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. And then you want to just trim away the rest of the piece. I'll set that aside. So now you want to take, now I'm going to be using tweezers because I don't have a quilling tool. I actually recently ordered one, and I'll let you know at the end of the video where you can order all my tools and supplies from. And you want to start rolling that up. And at first you want to just sort of condition the cardstock to bend and roll where you would like it to, but then at some point you need to take these out and twist it as tightly as you can. And then sometimes you can proceed with your fingers. It depends on how tight your cardstock will go with the tweezers in there, how fine the points are. These are actually from a flower making tool set that I love. It has several different tools in it that make making flowers so much easier. Now you can dot a little bit of glue along this as you roll it if you wish, or you can wait till you get to the end. So you want the middle to be a little smaller than 1/8 of an inch. when you get up to the point of the stamens. So if your cardstock is very thick or very thin, you may have to vary the point at which you start, but it's only a little scrap of cardstock, so if you have to start again, it's really not that big a deal. Sorry, this can be a little fiddly, this part. Again, that's why I ordered a quilling tool, because the quilling tool is so fine it can actually stay in until you finish rolling this. Now when you have when you look at your roll from this end, you want to stop when you get to a little bit less than 1/4 inch. You don't want it to be too fat in the middle there. So that's about where I am right now. So I'm going to stop and just trim off this extra bit. And then I'm going to put a little dot of glue there. So I'm going to put a bit of glue there and pause to let it dry, and then I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I actually switched to the little colored stamen that I was working on, or that I showed you earlier. And this is actually a good time, if any of your snips were a little bit thick, you could thin them out a tiny bit if you wish, if you can manage to cut something that tiny. And also, if you wanted to, you could round the corners of these pieces a little bit. I know it's very tiny, but it does make it look a little more refined. Of course, if you're using a die, you wouldn't have to do that. But you can see how I hope you can see anyways, how the stamens, I've pulled them apart a little bit, and they have a little bit of space in between them because of the little bit of rolled paper that we had in advance of the pieces that were sticking up, and it helps them to sort of stand apart. And that is more accurate to the way that the flowers looked like when I Googled them. And I was trying to go for authenticity here, so that's why I designed the center to look this way. So there's our middle part finished. And the next thing that we're going to do is you need a die cut from the Spellbinders rolled flower die. And you actually, normally it has some pieces in the middle, but I've actually removed the last two, and actually for the flower I made, I think I moved the last 3 petals, but I left this last one because I couldn't remember for sure. So I have actually sponged around the outside with pink ink and the inside with yellow, but I left these last couple unfinished because I wanted to show you how I do it. So I've got Spun Sugar Distress ink. I do prefer distress inks for sponging my flowers usually. In this case, we're going to wet this piece and rumple it up, so it actually doesn't really matter as much as it normally might what type of ink you use, but I do normally just reach for distress without even thinking about it for flowers because it does sponge on so much more smoothly. And I do the front, I did the back already. And then for the yellow, I use Scattered Straw Distress ink, and I just rub it on like that. Okay, so some people like to lay it down like this, and then they like to sponge. I find that a little harder, especially with this shape of die cut, because it's easy to get it on the other petals. And also I find it's sort of more intense and focused on the edges when you lift it up and hold it and swipe it like I was doing. So I actually prefer to do that for this particular flower. This one that I made before, I actually found that I wished that the color was more on the tips of the petals and not covering it so much, because I actually wished I had a little more dimension based on the ink being on the edges and not so much in the middle. So I actually hope this one's going to turn out with a little more dimension than that one. Fingers crossed. So we shall see how this one turns out. So that's just why I inked it the way I did. So the next step is to take a rag or a cloth or something and lay it out. And then you're going to need some sort of mister or sprayer bottle. I actually have one that is mixed with a little bit of Gold Perfect Pearls here. You can choose to put that in your sprayer bottle or not, it's up to you. And then you're going to spray it, and you're actually going to wet it quite well. I'm actually holding the edge of my cloth up so it doesn't spray my table. And you actually want to soak it pretty good, both sides. And then you want to let it sit. And that's pretty boring, so I'm going to pause for a second. So now we're ready to smush and ruffle the paper. Now we're going to take this other tool that is from the toolkit. I don't even know what it's called, but it's the only one in there that looks like this. So once you buy it, you'll know what it is. It actually has one end that you can use for embossing, rubbing into the flower petals and using it to cup them. And then the other end, I don't know, it feels like it's made out of maybe Teflon or something. There's this other end that I'm not entirely sure what it's for. But I'm sure you can find out if you watch some of Selma's videos. She's very good. She is actually on the design team for Joan's Gardens. Joan's Gardens is actually where I got most of the supplies for this. So anyways, what you're going to do is you're going to lay your paper on the tool lengthwise. And you want to work sort of towards the larger end. But you see there's sort of a... Let me see if I can get it on camera where you'll see it. Do you see that? There we go. See that groove in there right there? You don't want to work on that. So you want to work on the other side or just below it. So we're going to lay the tool near the wide end, and you want to press the paper until it wrinkles. Okay, do you see that? You want to use your nails, your fingers, pressing it together until it wrinkles up. I'm actually going to see if I can bring this closer to the camera to get a tighter shot of it. Let's see if I can do that. Let's see. There we go. Now you don't want big wrinkles. When I pushed that together at first, the wrinkle was a little too big. There's a lot of fingers in the way doing this technique, so I'm going to try and keep them out of the way as much as I can. It's kind of hard. Yeah, you smush the paper together. And every so often you have to realign it. You don't want it curling over too much. Okay, so we're going to continue smushing the paper together, creating little wrinkles all the way along the length. Okay, so when you finish, you should have the entire piece. Make sure too, when you work on a new section, you wrinkle up a new section, that you don't smush the older section. So you should have the whole piece look like this. So I'm going to finish the piece I was working on that fell off. Oh dear. And once it is dry, I will come back and show you how to roll it, even if it did rip, okay? My die cut is now dry. Do make sure that it is bone dry before you try working with it again. The adhesive just will not stick unless it is very dry. And truly, don't be worried about the fact that mine fell apart. If yours falls apart, it really isn't a problem. Frequently, when I make rolled roses, I actually tear the strip apart in order to place petals where they would naturally fall in nature, which is in between other petals. It's very rare in nature for petals to stack up behind another petal exactly. Normally, they fall in between so that they're sort of offset. And sometimes with a die, depending on the weight of your paper, when you roll it, it just doesn't fall in quite the right place. So I frequently tear mine and then readjust it or bunch it up to change where the petals lay. So it really doesn't make a difference. So what you're going to do now is you're going to take 1/8 inch score tape and you're going to start applying it to your flower. Now you can see mine is very scrunched up. Yours should be pretty scrunched up too. You're going to actually stretch it open in order to apply the score tape. So basically just start at one end and apply the score tape. If you're having trouble getting it in the nooks and crannies, use your thumbnail, or if you have no nails, you can maybe use the tip of tweezers or the tip of your embossing tool to sort of press it down and into those crevices.